I have always loved silence. For me, silence is an indispensable state of pleasure. It had been on my mind for a long time to leave the crowds, the traffic, and the noise of the city behind and settle in a place where I could be completely on my own. About 5 years ago, I moved to a small but sufficient stone house located in a rural and forested area in the Provence region of southern France, far away from the city. The house was completely surrounded by trees. It wasn't even clear where the boundaries of the land ended. Everywhere was forest as far as the eye could see. The nearest neighbor was kilometers away. In other words, it was impossible for someone to just knock on the door, stop by, or say, "I was just passing by." The only sounds I heard were the wind hitting the leaves of the trees and occasionally the sound of birds from afar. It was so peaceful here, and that was exactly how I wanted it to be. Fishing was the greatest pleasure in my life. Right behind the house where the trees end, there is a tiny but deep lake. I spend most of my time by the edge of that lake. For me, it is a place of escape from everything. When I go there, other sounds in the world seem to shut off. I don't mind the loneliness. In fact, I love being alone. Solitude is good for me. The house has a large veranda built to overlook the forest. In the evenings, I go out there, take a cold drink, watch the sun slowly disappear behind the trees, and listen to the sounds of the forest at night. It was always like this, always peaceful, until recently. Everything started 2.5 weeks ago. I was on the veranda again in the late afternoon. It had grown dark and the forest had turned gloomy. I was just staring into the darkness, doing nothing. At that exact moment, a sound came from within the forest. The sound of a branch snapping, crack. I didn't care at first. "It's the forest," I said to myself. "It's either a deer, a pig, or a squirrel. Animals are endless here. Having lived here for years, I was used to these small sounds." But in the following days, those sounds started coming more frequently and gradually increasing. At first, I still thought it was just animals. Initially, it was just the rustling of leaves, branches breaking, or bushes parting. But then one night, a different sound came. A scratching sound coming from the wall where the guest room is on the side of the house. It was very faint, as if whatever was making the sound was consciously trying to be quiet. I straightened up in my chair, my heart started beating a bit faster than normal. I listened. Then the sound stopped. "It's probably a squirrel, maybe a cat, it happens," I said and brushed it off, but there was a feeling inside me that wasn't quite satisfied. I was scared after all. This was a bit strange. That night, I closed the doors and windows and went inside. The next evening, I was outside again at the same hour. This time, the sound was more distinct. This time, it didn't just come from the side wall, but directly from under the guest room window. A very clear sound of rubbing, scraping, and scratching occurred. I stayed where I was and listened. I tried to determine the exact location of the sound. I thought to myself, this time it came from a bit too close. I parted the curtains slightly and looked out. The moon was illuminating the forest. The tree trunks cast long shadows on the ground. There was no wind, everything was still. I saw neither a person nor an animal. The branch must be rubbing against the glass. There's no wind, but maybe a branch bent from last night. I'm just overthinking it. I tried to calm and reassure myself. I told myself I was being ridiculous and went to bed, but I wasn't comfortable. There was still a sense of unease within me. The next night it happened again. This time it wasn't something that could be dismissed as an animal anymore. Because this time, a tap 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 sound, as if someone was tapping the window with the tip of a fingernail mixed in with the scratching. It was very faint but intentional, as if saying, "Look, I'm here." My heart stopped for a moment. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the flashlight. Since the inside of the house was dark, I walked slowly down the hallway without turning on the lights. I peeked into and opened the guest room door, parted the curtains, and shone the light outside. Again, there was no one. Not an animal, not a person, not even a branch to hit the window. But despite this, the air inside the house, especially in that room, began to feel strangely heavy, as if someone had entered the room and left. It was a strange and terrifying feeling. I couldn't get a wink of sleep that night. Every creak in the house sounded louder. Wooden floors naturally make noise at night, but the sounds that night were like footsteps, like the creak produced by the weight of a person. I only fell asleep after getting exhausted from listening. As the nights went by, the sounds never ended. Something definitely happened every night. Sometimes first the scratching, then the tap-tap, and sometimes very faint whispers that sounded like a human voice coming from inside the walls but with indistinguishable words. At first I brushed it off saying it's just animals, this is the forest, but my mind was no longer convinced. Finally I said, okay, whatever this is, I'm going to go and look. Waiting in fear was worse. I took a crowbar from the shack outside. Just in case something really showed up, I didn't want to be empty-handed. I entered the house and slowly opened the guest room door. The air inside was heavy and stale, as if it had been closed for months. I hadn't used this room for a long time anyway. I shone the light first on the bed, then the closet, then under the nightstand, then along the base of the walls. There was nothing. Just as I was about to say the sentence, I just scared myself. Something caught my eye. The closet door was slightly ajar. I hadn't left it like that. I approached slowly and opened the door. At first glance, the inside was empty, but when I shone the light into the back corner of the closet, where it met the wall, I saw a dark-colored piece of torn fabric. It looked as if it had been torn from someone's clothing and got caught while rubbing against the inside of the closet. At that moment, my breath hitched. I realized that someone had actually been here, because if an animal had entered, it wouldn't have left fabric like that. I backed out and closed the door. This time I locked it. I didn't want to stay inside the house, so I went out. But the outside was just as creepy as the inside. The darkness of the forest felt like it was closing in on me. Even the light from the shack wasn't enough. I tried to console myself by thinking maybe it's the psychology of loneliness, or maybe staying in these mountains for too long plays tricks on one's mind. That night, I slept on the sofa in the living room. I took a baseball bat with me. And strangely, I didn't hear a single sound that night. There was no tapping, no scratching. The house was completely silent. This was eerie in another way, because it felt as if that thing hadn't gone quiet because I scared it, but because it stopped of its own will. The next night I promised myself, I will not be afraid and run away from this house. This is my home. No one can drive me out of here. I got into bed. Just as my eyes were about to close, that familiar sound came again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was impossible to ignore. I bolted out of bed and grabbed the flashlight. I ran directly to the guest room and pulled the curtain open quickly. This time I didn't just see the moonlight and the trees. This time I saw a human shadow right outside the window. It was standing right there, not even a few meters away, right against the glass. It was barely discernible, but I could swear someone was there. In that moment, all the blood drained from my face. Who is this? How long has he been here? My brain started spinning. I backed away and rushed to the phone. My hands were shaking so much that I could hardly dial the number. I called the police. There is someone around my house. I think he's still here. Please send a team, I said. I described my location. They said, we are directing teams. Stay on the line. Right at that moment, a heavy creak came from inside the house, from the direction of the hallway. This creak didn't sound like the house's own noise. It was as if someone was walking very carefully. I realized he was now inside the house. Without waiting, I opened the back door and ran toward the forest. I didn't look back as I ran. My lungs burned as I moved through the forest, but I didn't stop. When I reached the edge of the property, by the side of the road, I saw the blue and red lights of the police cars in the distance. I hid behind the trees and watched the house. The police entered the house and searched it with their weapons drawn, but I could never go back to that house again, because I had a very clear feeling inside. Whoever it was, whatever that thing was, he hadn't finished his business yet. The next day, I contacted the police and told them I was alive so they wouldn't come looking for me. The house still stands there, alone in the middle of the forest, but it no longer feels like a home to me. When I close my eyes at night, I still hear that tap-tap sound. I don't know who that person was, what he wanted, or why he lurked around the house for days. But I am sure of one thing. He was waiting for me, and I think he is still waiting somewhere.